She once said, "I'm happy to be alive. I try to work with good people on good projects." And she did, until the very end. This is not a story about scandal. It is not about tragedy in the traditional sense. This is the story of Catherine O'Hara, a woman who shaped generations of comedy, redefined what longevity looks like in Hollywood, and proved that kindness, craft, and quiet brilliance can outlast noise, from sketch comedy stages to unforgettable film roles. From a frantic mother searching for her child to an eccentric matriarch who became iconic overnight. From early improv roots to a late career renaissance that introduced her to an entirely new generation. This is the full journey. And when it ends, it leaves behind something rare in this industry: respect, gratitude, and a legacy built not on excess, but on heart. Long before the awards, the red carpets, or the unforgettable characters, Catherine O'Hara was simply a young woman learning how to listen. Born in 1954 in Toronto, Canada, Catherine grew up in a large Irish Catholic family where observation mattered more than volume. She wasn't the loudest person in the room. She wasn't the one demanding attention. Instead, she watched. She absorbed rhythms, reactions, awkward pauses, and the strange poetry of everyday behavior. Those instincts would later become her greatest weapon. Comedy, for Catherine, was never about punchlines. It was about truth, exaggerated just enough to reveal something real. Her professional life truly began when she joined Second City Toronto in the early 1970s, one of the most demanding improv environments in North America. There were no safety nets there, no second takes. You either learned how to think fast, adapt, and trust your collaborators, or you disappeared. Catherine didn't just survive, she thrived. At Second City, she worked alongside future legends like John Candy, Eugene Levy, Rick Moranis, and Andrea Martin. What separated her from others wasn't flash, it was precision. She had an uncanny ability to step into a character fully formed, not as a joke, but as a person with history, flaws, and contradictions. That quality caught the attention of television producers. In 1976, Catherine became a cast member of SCTV, a sketch comedy show that would later be recognized as one of the most influential comedy programs of all time. Unlike many sketch shows, SCTV trusted its performers to build recurring characters slowly, organically, and often bizarrely. This was Catherine's playground. She didn't rely on catchphrases. She didn't repeat herself. Each character felt like someone you'd actually met, exaggerated reflections of real human behavior. Whether she was playing a pretentious socialite, a delusional performer, or an overly confident nobody, Catherine brought a level of sincerity that made the absurd believable. Audiences didn't just laugh at her characters, they recognized them. During this era, Catherine also formed creative bonds that would last decades. Her chemistry with Eugene Levy in particular became legendary. Their scenes were less about jokes and more about shared rhythm, two performers trusting silence as much as sound. But even as SCTV earned critical praise and cult devotion, Catherine never positioned herself as a star. She didn't chase the spotlight. She didn't brand herself. She simply kept working. That restraint would define her career. When she transitioned into film in the 1980s, she didn't arrive as a leading lady in the traditional sense. Instead, she slipped into stories, sometimes as supporting roles, sometimes as scene stealers, always elevating the material around her. Her early film work included roles in After Hours and Heartburn, where she proved she could move effortlessly between comedy and discomfort, humor and unease. Directors trusted her because she never overplayed. She understood tone instinctively. Then came the role that changed everything. In 1988, Catherine was cast as Delia Deetz in Beetlejuice. On paper, the character could have been one note: eccentric, annoying, excessive. In Catherine's hands, Delia became something else entirely. Absurd, yes, but also insecure, pretentious, and deeply human. She didn't play Delia as a caricature. She played her as a woman desperately trying to matter. That choice made Delia iconic. It was also on the set of Beetlejuice that Catherine met production designer Bo Welch. Their connection was quiet, natural, and enduring, a stark contrast to the chaos often associated with Hollywood relationships. They married and remained together for more than 3 decades, raising 2 sons away from the glare of celebrity culture. Family for Catherine was never an accessory to fame. It was the center of her life. In 1990, she took on another role that would become culturally immortal, Kate McAllister, the frantic mother in Home Alone. While the film is remembered for slapstick and holiday chaos, Catherine grounded it emotionally. Her performance wasn't about laughs, it was about panic, guilt, and maternal fear. Audiences believed her completely. That belief mattered, because Catherine never played down to comedy. She treated every role, no matter how broad, with seriousness and respect. As the 1990s continued, she remained consistently present without ever feeling overexposed. She reunited with Eugene Levy and Christopher Guest's mockumentaries, including Waiting for Guffman, Best in Show, and A Mighty Wind. These films relied entirely on improvisation. No scripts, no rehearsed jokes, only trust. Catherine flourished in that environment. Her characters were ridiculous, yes, but never cruel, never hollow. There was always vulnerability beneath the absurdity. What made her stand out during this period was longevity. While many comedians burned bright and vanished, Catherine endured. She adapted, she evolved. She stepped back when needed and returned when it felt right. She also avoided one of Hollywood's most common traps, reinvention for relevance. She didn't chase trends. She didn't force transformations. She stayed herself and let time catch up to her. By the early 2000s, Catherine had already built a career most performers would envy. And yet, the most defining chapter of her life was still ahead, because sometimes the industry doesn't recognize brilliance until it's undeniable. And when it finally does, the impact is seismic. By the late 1990s, Catherine O'Hara had achieved something rare in Hollywood: stability without stagnation. She was recognizable, respected, and consistently working, yet never overexposed. While others chased reinvention, Catherine refined what she already understood better than almost anyone else: character. This period of her career wasn't defined by one massive headline role. Instead, it was shaped by a series of performances that quietly deepened her legacy. She became the actor directors trusted when they needed something specific, not flashy, not exaggerated, but true. Nowhere was that trust clearer than in her long-running collaboration with filmmaker Christopher Guest. Guest's mockumentaries were an experiment in controlled chaos. No scripts, no safety net. Actors were given characters and situations, then allowed to improvise everything. For most performers, this environment was terrifying. For Catherine, it was home. In Waiting for Guffman, Best in Show, A Mighty Wind, and For Your Consideration, she created characters who were painfully ridiculous, yet heartbreakingly sincere. These weren't jokes stretched thin. They were fully realized people, desperate, hopeful, vain, insecure, and recognizable in ways that made audiences laugh and ache at the same time. Her genius in these films was restraint. She never pushed for laughs. She let the character breathe. She trusted silence. That approach made her performances age beautifully. Years later, viewers didn't just remember the jokes, they remembered the people. At the same time, Catherine was carving out another unexpected lane: voice acting. In 1993, she reunited with Tim Burton for The Nightmare Before Christmas, voicing Sally. The role required vulnerability without physical presence, emotion conveyed only through voice and song. Catherine delivered a performance that was soft, aching, and quietly powerful. Sally wasn't loud, she wasn't dominant, she endured. That voice performance became iconic, introducing Catherine to an entirely new generation of fans who might not have known her earlier work. And unlike many animated roles that fade into the background, Sally remained central, emotionally anchoring a film that would become a cult classic. Voice work followed in later years, including projects like Over the Hedge, Elemental, and The Wild Robot. Catherine approached animation the same way she approached live action, with seriousness and care. She never treated it as lesser work. Behind the scenes, her personal life remained remarkably steady. She and her husband, production designer Bo Welch, raised their two sons with deliberate distance from Hollywood excess. Catherine did not chase celebrity culture. She did not commodify her family. Red carpets were obligations, not destinations. That balance mattered. It allowed her to age naturally in an industry terrified of aging women. And yet, even with decades of consistent work, Catherine had not experienced what Hollywood often reserves for a select few: widespread, mainstream recognition at the level her talent deserved. That would come later, much later. In the years leading up to her renaissance, Catherine continued working. Guest roles, supporting performances, voice acting. Never disappearing, never demanding attention. There was no desperation in her choices, no attempts to stay relevant. She trusted the work. That trust paid off in an unexpected way. In 2015, Catherine was cast in a role written specifically for her, Moira Rose in Schitt's Creek. At first glance, the character seemed outrageous. A former soap star with an unplaceable accent, theatrical wardrobe, and bottomless self-regard. In lesser hands, Moira could have been unbearable. In Catherine's hands, she became iconic. What made Moira Rose extraordinary wasn't the wigs or the vocabulary, it was the contradiction. Beneath the ego and absurdity was a woman terrified of irrelevance, someone clinging to performance because she didn't know who she was without it. Catherine understood that instinct intimately. She played Moira not as a joke, but as a survivor. Audiences responded immediately. What began as a cult favorite exploded into a cultural phenomenon, particularly during the pandemic, when viewers found comfort in characters who were flawed but deeply bonded. Awards followed. Emmys, SAG Awards, critical acclaim, but Catherine's response remained grounded. She expressed gratitude, surprise, and genuine joy, never bitterness about the recognition arriving late. When she accepted her Emmy, she didn't posture. She thanked her collaborators. She spoke about family. She shared credit. It was vintage Catherine O'Hara. Even at the height of renewed fame, she kept working the same way she always had. She didn't overcommit. She didn't oversell herself. She chose projects that felt meaningful. In her later years, she took on dramatic roles that revealed another layer of her talent, including a haunting guest appearance in The Last of Us, where she played an alcoholic therapist grappling with grief and regret. The performance was quiet, devastating, and unforgettable. It reminded audiences of something they had always known, but perhaps forgotten. Catherine O'Hara was never just funny. She was profound. And even as accolades poured in, she remained deeply connected to the people who had been with her from the beginning. Collaborators, friends, and family who knew her before the spotlight found her again. That steadiness is what makes the final chapter of her life so difficult to process. Because she didn't fade away. She didn't disappear. She didn't slow down. She was still working, still creating, still scheduled to appear, which makes what comes next feel unreal. In the final years of her life, Catherine O'Hara seemed to have achieved something few in Hollywood ever do: peace without retreat. She was not slowing down because she had to. She was choosing her moments. After the global success of Schitt's Creek, Catherine entered a phase of her career that felt both celebratory and reflective. Offers came from everywhere: prestige television, major studios, animation giants, streaming platforms eager to work with an artist whose range now felt limitless. She could have done everything. She didn't. Instead, she chose carefully. Roles that meant something, collaborations that felt human, work that respected her intelligence rather than feeding off her fame. One of the most striking examples came with her guest appearance in The Last of Us. Stripped of comedy, stripped of extravagance, Catherine delivered a performance built almost entirely on restraint. She played an alcoholic therapist weighed down by grief, a woman who had lived long enough to know that some wounds never close. It was devastating. Audiences who had known her primarily through humor were stunned. Critics praised the performance as fearless, raw, and deeply honest. It confirmed confirmed what those closest to her had always known. Catherine O'Hara had never been just a comedian. Comedy had simply been the language through which she told the truth. Around the same time, she continued voice work in animated films, lending warmth and depth to characters that could easily have been forgettable in lesser hands. Even in projects aimed at children, her performances carried emotional intelligence, never condescending, never careless. Off camera, her life remained rooted in the same values she had always protected. More than 3 decades together in an industry notorious for burning through relationships felt almost radical. Their 2 sons grew up away from the noise, away from the pressure of legacy. Catherine never pushed them toward the industry. She never needed her success reflected back through them. When asked about legacy, she often redirected the question. Family, she said, was what mattered. Friends describe her as generous in the most meaningful way, not with advice, but with attention. She listened, she remembered details, she showed up. Younger performers often spoke about how she made them feel safe on set, how she never dominated scenes, how she elevated everyone around her. There was no ego to manage, no insecurity to navigate. That made the news of her passing all the more jarring. Paramedics were called to her Los Angeles home in the early morning hours. Reports described breathing difficulty. Her representative later confirmed her death, citing a brief illness. No long public battle, no drawn-out farewell, just sudden absence. In the weeks before, there had been quiet signs, missed appearances, a skipped award show nomination, a noticeable thinness at her last public event. But nothing that suggested an ending so close. She was still working. Production on a new season of The Studio had already begun. Catherine was expected to return. She was scheduled for press appearances. Colleagues were planning scenes with her. The future was active, not reflective. That's what made it so hard to accept. Tributes poured in almost immediately. Michael Keaton, her longtime collaborator and friend, called her his pretend wife, pretend nemesis, and real-life true friend. Seth Rogen spoke of how her presence alone raised the standard of every project she touched. Eugene Levy, her creative partner for decades, expressed grief that felt personal, not performative. And then there were the quieter tributes, the ones that mattered most. Former co-stars spoke about her kindness. Crew members remembered how she treated everyone equally, regardless of status. Young actors recalled moments when she offered reassurance without drawing attention to herself. Perhaps the most devastating words came from someone who had once played her son on screen. Macaulay Culkin wrote simply, "Mama, I thought we had time. I wanted more." It was a line that echoed what so many felt, because Catherine O'Hara didn't feel finished. Her passing wasn't the end of a long goodbye. It was the interruption of momentum. In the days that followed, audiences revisited her work, not out of obligation, but out of comfort. Scenes from Home Alone, moments from Beetlejuice, entire episodes of Schitt's Creek replayed not just for laughs, but for familiarity. She had become part of people's emotional memory, not because she demanded it, but because she earned it. What stands out most in retrospect is how rare her career truly was. She never burned bridges. She never reinvented herself to survive. She never chased relevance. She simply stayed good at her craft, good to the people around her, good to herself. In an industry built on noise, Catherine O'Hara proved that longevity can be quiet. That impact doesn't require domination. That respect can be cumulative, built slowly, honestly, over time. Her death feels heavy not because of scandal or tragedy, but because of loss. The loss of a steady presence. The loss of a voice that understood how to make us laugh without cruelty. The loss of an artist who reminded us that comedy, at its best, is compassion. And yet, her work remains. It remains in the characters that continue to feel alive, in the performances that still feel intimate, in the laughter that doesn't fade even when the person behind it is gone. The final chapter is not about how she died. It's about what she left behind. When the noise fades, when the tributes slow, and when the headlines move on, what remains is the truest measure of a life. In the case of Catherine O'Hara, what remains is something rare in Hollywood: trust. Audiences trusted her, co-stars trusted her, directors trusted her, and most importantly, she trusted herself. She never chased immortality. She never performed desperation. She never tried to outgrow her age or apologize for it. In an industry that constantly demands reinvention, Catherine quietly proved that depth could be enough. Look closely at her body of work and a pattern emerges. She gravitated toward characters who were misunderstood rather than admired. Women who were excessive, anxious, strange, or out of step with the world around them. She never asked the audience to mock them. She asked them to recognize them. That choice mattered. It is easy to play comedy for applause. It is much harder to play it with empathy. That empathy is why her performances lasted. Decades later, people don't quote her characters because they were loud. They remember them because they were human. Because somewhere inside the absurdity, there was vulnerability, a fear of being irrelevant, unloved, or unseen. And Catherine never treated those fears as jokes. Even in her most flamboyant roles, there was always dignity beneath the exaggeration. She understood that humor doesn't come from cruelty. It comes from honesty, from holding up a mirror gently enough that people are willing to look. Her personal life reflected that same philosophy. She did not sell access. She did not trade mystery for attention. She did not confuse fame with worth. For more than 3 decades, she built a life rooted in partnership, family, and creative respect. In a culture that rewards oversharing, she chose privacy. In an industry that burns people out, she paced herself. That decision gave her something priceless: time. Time to evolve, time to step away, time to return when the work felt right. So when her late career renaissance arrived, it didn't feel like a comeback. It felt like recognition catching up to consistency. And when her passing came, it didn't feel like closure. It felt unfinished. Not because she left things undone, but because she was still moving forward, still creating, still showing up with curiosity and care, still choosing joy over noise. That is why the loss feels personal to so many people. Because Catherine O'Hara didn't belong to a single generation. She belonged to childhood memories, to holiday rituals, to late-night comedy, to quiet moments when laughter was the only relief. She was there, not loudly, not insistently, but reliably. And reliability is a kind of love. The industry will continue. Awards will still be handed out. New stars will rise. But there will be a noticeable absence. An absence of generosity on screen, an absence of humor without cruelty, an absence of a performer who never needed to dominate a scene to define it. Catherine O'Hara leaves behind more than a filmography. She leaves behind permission. Permission to age naturally. Permission to value collaboration over ego. Permission to believe that kindness is not a weakness in art. It is a strength. In the end, her legacy isn't about how many awards she won or how many iconic roles she played. It's about how she made people feel seen, understood, comforted, and very often lighter, even if only for a moment. If this story stayed with you, if her work shaped a memory in your life, leave a comment sharing which role meant the most to you. Like this video so her legacy continues to reach new audiences, and subscribe if you want more stories that honor artists not just for their fame, but for their humanity. Because some people don't just entertain us, they walk alongside us for years, and even when they're gone, their presence never truly leaves.